Between the world of the living and the dead, the mirror is the only surface that refuses to shelter lies. Since the dawn of humanity, the mirror has not been merely an object of vanity, but a portal to truths we would rather ignore. For mortals, it reveals wrinkles and imperfections. For immortals, it exposes the monstrous nature hidden beneath seductive skin. Vampires, creatures of the night who defy the laws of life and death, have found in the mirror their most relentless judge. Throughout this video, we will unravel the ancient mystery that connects vampires to mirrors, an enigma that spans centuries and cultures. We will explore why these supposedly powerful beings tremble before a simple object made of glass and silver. We will dive into the depths of European folklore, Asian legends, and modern cinematic interpretations to understand how this myth developed and endured in the collective imagination. What we will witness is not merely a compilation of superstitions, but a deep analysis of the mirror's symbolism as an instrument of truth. When we say that a vampire has no reflection, what do we really mean? Is it the absence of a reflectioner, the revelation of something so horrific that the human mind prefers to interpret it as emptiness? For those who stay until the end, we will unveil a groundbreaking theory about the true vampiric form and how it manifests in both the physical and metaphysical realms. The journey we are about to embark on is not for the faint of heart. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about vampires and mirrors. The reward for those who dare to follow through to the end will be forbidden knowledge that few mortals possess, the true nature of the creatures that dwell in the shadows of the night, and why, after millennia, they still refuse to face their own reflection. The mirror is older than civilization itself. Ever since humans first discovered their reflection in still waters, we have developed a relationship of both fascination and terror with our own image. In ancient cultures, the first mirror was not made of glass, but of polished black obsidian, used by the Aztecs not only for admiration, but as a portal for communication with the spiritual world. This primordial association between mirrors and the supernatural laid the foundation for what would become the vampire myth. In medieval Europe, when the first structured accounts of vampires began to circulate, the mirror already bore centuries of mystical significance. The peasants of Transylvania region that would become the cradle of the Dracula legend believed that the mirror could capture the soul of anyone who looked into it. For a creature already devoid of a soul, like the vampire, the act of looking into a mirror posed an existential risk. There was nothing to be reflected. Or worse, there was something so grotesque that it defied human comprehension. The concept of the absent reflection also emerged from a theological perspective. In medieval Christianity, it was argued that the reflection was the manifestation of the soul created by God. As a cursed creature, rejected by the divine and condemned to immortality as punishment, the vampire's reflection could not exist in harmony with natural law. This religious interpretation strengthened the myth, transforming the mirror into a tool of protection against the undead, capable of revealing their true demonic nature. Human fascination with mirrors has transcended centuries and cultures, from ancient Egypt to imperial China. In Japanese mythology, we find the Yata no Kagami, a sacred mirror capable of attracting gods and spirits. In Romanian tradition, the birthplace of many vampire legends covering mirrors during funerals became a common practice to prevent the soul of the deceased from becoming trapped or, worse, to stop malevolent entities from using the mirror as a portal to invade the world of the living. This revealing practice persists to this day, even when its original meaning has long been forgotten. In the vast landscape of vampiric folklore, the fear of the reflection manifests in surprisingly varied ways. In 17th century Romania, accounts describe vampires who, when confronted with mirrors, would disintegrate into ashes, as if the truth of their condition were unbearable even to themselves. In contrast, in Bulgarian legends, it was believed that the vampire saw not its current form in the mirror, but the decomposing corpse it was meant to be, constant reminder of the natural order it violated by returning from the dead. 19th century Gothic literature crystallized the idea of the vampire without a reflection, most notably through Bram Stoker's Dracula, published in 1897. In this seminal novel, Jonathan Harker realizes the Count's supernatural nature when he notices his absence in the mirror while watching him shave. This seemingly simple literary moment cemented the association between vampires and the lack of reflection in the collective mind, transforming it from a local superstition into a defining element of global vampire mythology. In Slavic traditions, particularly in Serbia and Ukraine, we find fascinating variations on the theme. In these regions, it was believed that the vampire did indeed have a reflection, but that it revealed its beastly form usually, with wolf-like or bat-like features exposing the human facade as mere illusion. This concept suggests that the mirror does not deny the reflection, but rather reveals a hidden truth, functioning as a supernatural detector that unmasks the vampire's human pretense. Asian folklore presents intriguing parallels. In ancient China, bronze mirrors were considered powerful talismans against demons and malevolent spirits, collectively known as jiangshi, the hopping corpses that share characteristics with Western vampires. These mirrors not only revealed the creature's true form, but also temporarily paralyzed it, allowing skilled hunters to perform rituals of exorcism or destruction. This tradition reinforces the universal idea of the mirror as an instrument of ultimate truth, capable of piercing supernatural illusions across diverse cultures. The modern era has brought new dimensions to the myth of the vampire and its reflection. Cinema, with its immediate visual power, has profoundly transformed our perception of this phenomenon. From Nosferatu 1922, the first major vampire film, to contemporary productions, the absence of a reflection has become a powerful visual elementa, revealing moment that instantly communicates the character's supernatural nature to the audience. This cinematic convention is so potent that it rarely needs explanation. The audience immediately understands the meaning when the camera captures an empty mirror where the vampire's reflection should be. Literary and cinematic adaptations of the 20th century have constantly reimagined this aspect of the vampire myth. Anne Rice, in her influential series, The Vampire Chronicles, challenged tradition by presenting vampires who could be photographed and seen in mirrors, suggesting either an evolution in vampiric nature or a questioning of the truth behind ancient superstitions. This approach paved the way for more complex and psychological interpretations of the modern vampire, distancing it from the constraints of traditional folklore and bringing it closer to the human condition, with all its contradictions and nuances. Conversely, filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola and Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992, chose to explore the tradition in visually innovative ways. In a memorable scene, the Count's reflection appears in the mirror several seconds after his movements, suggesting a fundamental disconnect between the vampire and the laws of nature. This visual subtlety offers a sophisticated interpretation of the myth, implying that the vampire is not entirely absent from the reflected physical world, but exists in disharmony with Ite, visual metaphor for his condition, as a creature that dwells at the thresholds between worlds. Contemporary pop culture has played with these conventions, subverting them for dramatic or comedic effect. Series like True Blood and films like Twilight feature vampires who can be seen in mirrors and photographed, while the comedy What We Do in the Shadows draws humor from the vampire's frustration at being unable to check their appearance before going out. These modern reinterpretations reflect our own evolving relationship with the imagen, an age of selfies and constant surveillance. The inability to be visually captured transforms from a curse into a potential liberation, an ironic commentary on our contemporary obsession with appearance and visual representation. The more we advance in our scientific understanding of the world, the more intriguing the analysis of vampire myths becomes when viewed through the lens of modern science. The very nature of mirrors and reflection offers fascinating perspectives. Ancient mirrors, made primarily of polished silver, contain significant amounts of this metal, the same metal often cited as fatal to vampires in traditional legends. This coincidence raises a provocative hypothesis. Could the vampire's aversion to mirrors be a folkloric encoding of their vulnerability to silver? Perhaps the danger was never in the reflection itself, but in the material that produced it. The physics of light also provides potential explanations. Vampires are universally depicted as nocturnal creatures, hostile to sunlight, which often destroys them. Mirrors, by definition, reflect light, essentially redirecting and concentrating light rays. On a fundamental level, a mirror can be seen as a light amplifier, capable of projecting and intensifying exactly what vampires fear most. This scientific perspective offers an elegant explanation. It is not the absence of a reflection that defines the vampire, but rather their hypersensitivity to reflected light, which compels them to avoid reflective surfaces. Speculative biological perspectives also merit consideration. If we view vampires as entities existing in an ambiguous quantum state, simultaneously alive and dead, we could theorize that direct observation would collapse this superposed state into a single defined condition. The mirror, as an instrument of indirect observation, might fail to capture this fundamental duality, resulting in the apparent absence of a reflection. This modern interpretation curiously echoes ancient beliefs about the mirror as a revealer of true nature, in this case, the quantum truth of an existence that defies conventional categories. The optical properties of biological materials may also offer insights. Recent research on metamaterials artificial substances with extraordinary optical properties demonstrated that it is theoretically possible to create materials that manipulate light in ways that render them functionally invisible under certain conditions. If vampires naturally possessed a biological structure similar to these metamaterials, with unique refractive indices, they could interact with light in fundamentally different ways from humans, resulting in altered reflective properties that explain their invisibility in mirrors, without resorting to the supernatural. We have now reached the culmination of our investigation, the revelation that few have dared to fully articulate: the true vampiric form. The clues were in front of us all along, scattered across fragments of legend and hidden in the subtext of survivor accounts. What the mirror actually reveals or fails to reveal is not merely an absence, but a presence that defies our fundamental understanding of physical reality. In the depths of medieval occult texts, particularly in the grimoires of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, we find unsettling descriptions of entities that exist simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes. These texts propose that certain creatures, which we may now recognize as vampires in their essential form, possess an existential geometry impossible to fully perceive with the human eye or to be captured by conventional reflective surfaces. Much like hyperdimensional objects that lose critical aspects of their structure when projected into lower dimensions, the vampire would be an entity whose true form transcends our three-dimensional perceptual capacity. Secret manuscripts found in the Vatican's underground archives, dated to the 14th century, contain disturbing accounts from exorcists who, in moments of extreme spiritual clarity, glimpsed the unfolded form of certain nocturnal beings. These testimonies describe creatures composed of folds upon folds of flesh and shadow, with limbs extending in impossible directions and facial features existing simultaneously in multiple states. Most significantly, these accounts suggest that such beings appeared to fold into themselves when confronted with sanctified objects, including blessed mirrors, if trying to retract aspects of their existence that overflowed into our dimensional plane. Japanese folklore offers a fascinating parallel through the concept of yokai, supernatural entities often capable of shape-shifting. Particularly relevant is the bakemono, a creature that exists in a constant state of transformation. Ancient texts from Shinto tradition suggest that these beings do not transform in the Western sense, but rather reveal different facets of their multifaceted true nature as needed. This Eastern conception of metamorphic entities provides a valuable conceptual model for understanding the vampire not as a transformed human, but as a fundamentally other entity that merely adopts a temporary configuration perceivable by human senses. The true horror of the mirror, then, would not be in showing nothing, but potentially in revealing everything, forcing the full manifestation of an entity that normally keeps most of its existence folded into dimensions beyond our perception. Historical accounts of vampires fleeing, screaming, or disintegrating in front of mirrors take on new meaning from this perspective. It is not the void that terrifies them, but the complete exposure of a form that even they themselves may be unable to bear confronting. The mirror, in this context, acts not only as a detector, but as a device that forces the dimensional unpacking of an entity that exists primarily in folded and superimposed states. This revolutionary hypothesis is further corroborated by contemporary observations of quantum anomalies in locations reportedly haunted. Preliminary research using quantum field detectors in historically vampiric sites has registered patterns of quantum interference that suggest the presence of multidimensional structures temporarily intersecting our three-dimensional plane. These measurements, though still experimental, align perfectly with the proposed theory of the true vampiric nature. The vampire, therefore, is not merely undead, but an entity whose existence fundamentally transcends the binary categories of life and death, a creature existing in overlapping states, whose humanoid appearance is merely a convenient three-dimensional projection of a far more complex and incomprehensible reality. The mirror, in its function as an exact replicator of physical reality, fails not because the vampire does not exist, but because its existence is far too complex to be contained within the simple process of light reflection. The revelation of the vampire's multidimensional nature not only redefines our understanding of these legendary creatures, but also reshapes our very perception of reality and the boundaries between worlds. If we accept the premise that vampires are entities that exist primarily in dimensions beyond our immediate perception, manifesting only partially in our plane of existence, the implications are both profound and unsettling. First, the vampire's vulnerability to religious symbols gains a far more sophisticated explanation. It may not be divine power itself that repels these creatures, but the sacred geometry embedded within many of these symbols patterns, which, when perceived by the vampire, force an uncomfortable or painful dimensional reconfiguration. The cross, in particular, with its intersection of horizontal and vertical lines, could function as a dimensional anchor, constraining the vampiric entity to a more limited and defined state, preventing it from maintaining its naturally multifaceted configuration. Secondly, this theory elegantly accounts for the historical inconsistencies found in reports of vampire encounters regarding their abilities and limitations. As multidimensional entities, vampires would exist on a spectrum of manifestation, with different individuals capable of projecting themselves into our plane with varying degrees of completeness and stability. The oldest and most powerful vampires would be those who have mastered the art of compressing their true nature into a convincingly human physical manifestation, while younger or less disciplined vampires would struggle to maintain the illusion, explaining reports of involuntary transformations during moments of stress or hunger. Vampiric longevity also takes on a new perspective under this theory. It is not immortality in the conventional sense, but rather a fundamentally different relationship with linear time. If these creatures exist partially in dimensions where time does not flow as it does in our reality, their apparent immortality would simply be the result of an existence distributed across multiple temporal points simultaneously. Aging, as we understand it, would be irrelevant to an entity whose being is not fully anchored in our linear temporal sequence. The need to consume human blood, perhaps the most defining aspect of the vampire myth, can be reinterpreted as a need to absorb a biological component that facilitates dimensional anchoring. Blood, with its rich chemical composition and unique electromagnetic properties, would serve as a stabilizer that enables the vampire to maintain a coherent presence in our plane of existence. Without this dimensional stabilizer, the vampiric entity would begin to lose cohesion in our reality, experiencing a slippage back into its natural multidimensional state. A process felt as extreme pain and physical deterioration. Finally, this hypothesis offers an explanation for the central paradox of vampire mythology. How can these creatures be so powerful and yet so vulnerable? As superior predators, vampires possess superhuman strength, speed, and senses. Yet they are incapacitated by seemingly trivial elements such as garlic or running water. The answer lies in the fundamentally precarious nature of their existence in our plane of presence that, though powerful, is inherently unstable and susceptible to disruption by elements that interfere with the delicate dimensional harmony required to sustain their physical manifestation. As scientists and occultists continue to collaborate in unraveling the mysteries between dimensions, we may be closer than ever to understanding the true nature of the beings that dwell in the shadows. The mirror, in its deceptive simplicity, remains our most valuable ally in this pursuit, not as a mere vampire detector, but as a window through which we may glimpse, even if only briefly, the multidimensional truth concealed beneath the human mask. For those brave enough to look beyond the ordinary reflection, the mirror offers not just an image, but a portal into the depths of multidimensional reality where the true vampires reside.